And I'm curious your thoughts on what the president's talking about. He went on to write, as I told Iran once before, make a deal. They didn't, and there was Operation Midnight Hammer, a major destruction of Iran. The next attack will be far worse. What's about to happen?
Well, Joe, that is a fantastic question. I mean, there is so much we learn from this tweet, because you're right. As you said, essentially all the threats that Trump had made in the last couple of weeks against Iran, and his whole stated reason for sending this armada to the region was to protect those protesters and prevent the regime from cracking down even further on them. But now he's suggesting that he's shifting back to the nuclear element and pushing for a permanent nuclear deal. So what that tells me is that there is a lot of credence we should be giving to these reports and indications we have that there's a lot of diplomacy going on in the region. We know Iran wanted to resume some of the negotiations and restart talks with the United States after those June attacks basically suspended any talks on its nuclear program. So it does seem like there's some sort of tentative thing happening here where there is a potential for a new round of conversations. And then you have Trump falling back into his very familiar role of carrots and sticks. Obviously, you can't get a much bigger stick than the threat of another U.S. military attack. So whether something is imminent, I mean, that certainly is the suggestion. Wouldn't be surprised after Venezuela, but at this point, we're just still very much in a wait-and-see mode.
You know, it's interesting because after those initial strikes, or the initial strike on Iran, in which we brought the B-2 bombers over there, attacked Fordow and the other underground installations, the president said that Iran's nuclear capability had been completely and totally obliterated. Why would we need a nuclear deal if that was the case?
Well, it's a great question that the Iranians are also asking, because, of course, they say they never intended to have a nuclear weapon, and this nuclear program was for peaceful purposes only. Obviously, a lot of skepticism about that, though U.S. intelligence had also determined that Iran was not making a breakout for the bomb. But what we do know is that despite those strikes by the U.S. last June, Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium remains essentially intact. And we had the UN nuclear watchdog, the IAEA, essentially saying a few days ago in an interview with Bloomberg, actually, that they could restart their program. It might take a little while, but the ability to do that had not been totally taken off the table. So obviously, take the president's argument that the nuclear program had been completely obliterated with a grain of salt. But it seems in some ways like maybe there's some tentative conversations happening, and the president's looking to head off another confrontation, another potential need to attack the nuclear sites that would essentially put paid to his claim that program had basically been wiped out.
Got it. Fascinating. In our remaining moment, Nick, the president says this armada is bigger than the one we had off the coast of Venezuela. Should we expect a blockade of oil tankers? And is it actually larger? The Jerry Ford's the biggest aircraft carrier in the world.
Well, Pentagon has not actually disclosed numbers, so we can't really say whether this flotilla is actually bigger. But, the thing with this administration is they have so pushed beyond the bounds of what we would have normally expected. I mean, that attack on Venezuela, capturing Maduro, essentially rewrote the rules of the game in a lot of ways. So with that in mind, it's hard to rule anything out, whether it's an attack or a potential blockade, to really put the squeeze on Iran's oil trade, particularly with China, where they gain a great deal of revenue.